Listen, I know how confusing it feels when a man pulls back. 1 minute he's all in, texting you, calling you, wanting your time. Then suddenly it's silence. No calls, no replies, no energy. And you sit there asking yourself, what did I do wrong? Did I say something? Did I push too hard? But let me tell you the truth. Most of the time it ain't about you. When a man ignores you, he's not necessarily thinking about you at all. He's thinking about himself. When someone ignores you, it is natural to immediately turn inward and wonder what you might have done wrong. The silence feels heavy, almost personal, as though it is a reflection of your worth. You start replaying conversations, analyzing your words, or thinking about the last interaction you had with him. Did you say too much? Did you not say enough? Did you show too much interest or perhaps too little? These questions swirl around in your mind because human nature always pushes us to assume that another person's actions are directly connected to us. But the truth is, it's not always about you. Many times when a man ignores you, his actions are shaped by his own thoughts, struggles, insecurities, or distractions that have nothing to do with you at all. You see, people carry a world of battles inside them that they don't always share. A man might be ignoring you not because of something you did, but because he is stressed about his job, his finances, or even his identity. Some men retreat into silence when life feels overwhelming. Not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to communicate through the storm. If you take that silence personally, you put unnecessary weight on yourself for something that is rooted in his journey, not your actions. There are also times when ignoring has more to do with fear than indifference. A man can pull back because he realizes he is developing deeper feelings and he doesn't know how to handle them. Commitment, vulnerability, and emotional intimacy can scare someone who is not ready to deal with them. Instead of admitting his feelings, he takes the easy route, silence. To you, it feels like rejection. To him, it feels like protection. He is not protecting you, though. He is protecting himself from emotions he doesn't know how to manage. And then there's the truth about distraction. Sometimes when a man ignores you, it's not that he doesn't value you, but that he is prioritizing something else at that moment. Work goals, personal ambitions, or even unhealthy distractions like social validation or attention from others can cause him to disconnect. In those moments, his silence is not a mirror of your worth, but a reflection of where his focus lies. That is why it's dangerous to take his behavior as evidence of your flaws. His silence speaks more about his priorities than your value. What makes this so important to understand is the shift it creates in how you see yourself. If you believe every time someone ignores you, it must mean you are lacking, you will constantly doubt your worth. You will start to mold yourself to fit someone else's attention, chasing their approval instead of owning your identity. But if you understand that his ignoring is often not about you at all, you can release yourself from unnecessary self-blame. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And you start asking, what's going on with him? That shift keeps your self-respect intact. It's also a reminder to be cautious about over-investing in people who cannot communicate clearly. If a man ignores you, he may be going through something, but it is not your job to carry the entire weight of his silence. You can be understanding without sacrificing your peace. You can have empathy without making excuses. Recognizing that it's not always about you gives you the freedom to protect your energy. At the end of the day, you must remember this. Your value is not measured by how consistently someone else acknowledges you. Your worth doesn't rise or fall with someone else's attention. When a man ignores you, it often reflects his confusion, his distractions, or his fears. It is his story, his struggle, his choice. And while it might affect you, it is not a definition of you. By holding on to that truth, you preserve your confidence, your dignity, and your power. Because once you know it's not always about you, you stop living for someone else's silence and you start living for your own peace. Silence is not just the absence of words. It is a form of communication all on its own. When a man chooses to ignore you, when he withdraws into silence instead of offering clarity, what he is really doing is revealing where you stand in his life. It may not feel like it in the moment because silence often leaves you confused, searching for hidden meanings, trying to fill in the blanks with your imagination. But if you step back, you'll see that silence is one of the clearest messages a person can send. The choice not to communicate says just as much, if not more, than the choice to speak. Think about it. When someone values you, they don't leave you in the dark. They want to reassure you, clarify where things stand, and keep the connection alive. They won't risk you feeling neglected or unimportant because they understand the importance of consistency. On the other hand, when a man allows silence to linger, when he deliberately avoids reaching out or explaining himself, he's showing you something vital, how much he values your presence. If you are left wondering where you stand, then that in itself is your answer. The mistake many people make is trying to reinterpret silence as something neutral or harmless. You might tell yourself he is just busy, he needs space, or he will come around eventually. But a man who is genuinely invested will never allow the woman he cares for to question her place in his life. Silence is not just space, it is a choice. And in that choice, you see where you rank on his list of priorities. Now, that doesn't mean silence is always cruel or intentional. Sometimes it comes from immaturity, fear, or even a lack of emotional tools to express what he feels. But even then, the end result is the same. If his silence leaves you questioning your worth, it is because he has not chosen to show you with words or actions that you matter enough for clarity, and that reveals his value system. A man who prioritizes you will never let you carry the burden of doubt alone. There is also an empowering side to silence once you start interpreting it correctly. Instead of chasing explanations or trying to decode every pause, you can begin to see it as a filter. Silence filters out who is truly invested in you and who is not. It spares you wasted time because it reveals the truth without you having to beg for it. If someone cannot pick up the phone, send a message, or express their intentions, then that silence is a reflection of their commitment or lack of it. The danger lies in what you choose to do with that silence. Too often, people take it as a challenge, thinking they can fill the gap by proving themselves, reaching out more, or accepting less than they deserve just to keep the connection alive. But doing that only teaches the other person that their silence works. They learn that they can withdraw and still keep your attention. That kind of dynamic erodes your value in the relationship. You should never have to convince someone that you are worth consistent communication. Instead, see silence for what it really is, an unspoken truth. It is not always loud, but it is always clear. It tells you whether someone values your presence or takes it for granted. It tells you whether they respect your need for clarity or dismiss it. And most importantly, it gives you the opportunity to decide whether you will tolerate uncertainty or demand respect. In the end, silence reveals value, not just in the way he treats you, but also in the way you treat yourself. If his silence shows that you are not a priority to him, then your response shows whether you are a priority to yourself. The moment you stop accepting silence as an excuse and start seeing it as an answer, you reclaim your power. You no longer measure your worth by someone else's inconsistency, but by your own decision to walk away from anything that doesn't honor your presence. So when you are faced with silence, don't waste your time filling it with excuses. Recognize it for what it is, the clearest indicator of how much or how little you are valued. And then act accordingly, because you deserve more than silence. You deserve certainty, respect, and love that does not hide behind unanswered calls and unspoken words. When a man ignores you, it's easy to assume there's just one explanation. Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe he lost interest. Or maybe he's just playing games. But the truth is more complex than that. Men ignore for different reasons, and understanding those reasons can change the way you respond. Instead of immediately blaming yourself or trying to fix the situation, you begin to see his silence as a reflection of where he is in his life, his maturity, and his intentions. Every man has his own motivations, and sometimes the silence has less to do with you and more to do with what's going on inside of him. One of the most common reasons is confusion. Many men don't actually know what they want. They might be attracted to you, enjoy your company, and even feel something deeper starting to build. But the weight of commitment scares them. They don't want to give more than they're ready for, and instead of communicating honestly, they retreat. Silence becomes a shield against making promises they're afraid to keep. In that case, ignoring you is not about you being unworthy. It's about him avoiding responsibility. Another reason men ignore is fear of emotions. For some men, emotional vulnerability feels like weakness if they've been raised to hide their feelings, taught that expressing emotions makes them less masculine, or if they've been hurt before, they might run from intimacy. When they realize they're falling for you, they panic. Ignoring you becomes their way of regaining control over emotions that feel too big or too dangerous to admit. It isn't fair to you, but it reveals their struggle with emotional maturity. Then there's testing boundaries. Some men ignore to see how much they can get away with. They want to know how much of your attention and effort they can hold on to without giving the same in return. If you continue to call, text, and chase, even when they've gone silent, it tells them that they can offer the bare minimum and still keep you around. In these cases, ignoring isn't about confusion or fear. It's about control. It's a game to them, and silence is their way of testing whether you'll accept crumbs instead of demanding the full meal. Distraction is another big reason. A man might be so focused on his career, personal goals, or even outside attention that he simply pushes you aside. He convinces himself he'll come back when things settle down. But in reality, he's showing you that you are not a priority. His silence becomes a reflection of his priorities. And no matter how much you excuse it, it still tells you where you stand in his list of concerns. And sometimes the reason is simple but hard to accept: loss of interest. People change their minds and feelings shift. A man might enjoy the chase, but once the excitement wears off, he pulls away instead of ending things respectfully. Silence becomes the easiest way to fade out without confrontation. This one stings the most because it feels like rejection, but even here, it's less about your worth and more about his inability to communicate like an adult. Understanding that men ignore for different reasons doesn't make the silence less painful, but it helps you see it for what it really is. His behavior is a window into his mindset. Confusion shows he's not ready. Fear shows he's not secure. Testing shows he's manipulative. Distraction shows you're not a priority. Loss of interest shows he's not invested. In every case, the silence says more about him than it does about you. The real question isn't why he ignores you. It's what you do when he does. You cannot control his reasons, but you can control your response. Do you sit in confusion, waiting and hoping he'll explain himself? Or do you recognize the silence as an answer in itself? Men may ignore for different reasons, but the effect is always the same. They are choosing not to show up for you. And once you understand that, you can decide not to show up for someone who can't even give you the respect of communication. When you find yourself being ignored, the first instinct is to turn inward and ask, what did I do wrong? That question comes from a place of doubt, a place where you assume you must have made a mistake to deserve silence. You replay the conversations, you examine every text, and you look for signs that you pushed too hard or cared too much. But here's the truth. That question keeps you trapped in self-blame. The better question, the one that changes everything, is not why is he ignoring me, but why am I giving my time and energy to someone who can't even give me clarity? Flipping the question shifts the power back to you. When you ask why he's ignoring you, you're placing him at the center of the story. His behavior, his silence, his decisions all become the focus. But when you ask why you are entertaining that behavior, suddenly you are back in control. It forces you to look at your own standards, your own boundaries, and your own willingness to accept treatment that doesn't honor your worth. Instead of chasing answers from him, you begin finding answers within yourself. Here's why that matters. A man's silence may not change. You could wait weeks, months, or even years, and he still might not give you the explanation you crave. But your response, that can change immediately. By flipping the question, you remind yourself that you are not powerless. You cannot control his actions, but you can absolutely control how you allow those actions to affect you. You can decide that silence is an answer in itself and that your energy is too valuable to waste on uncertainty. Flipping the question also uncovers patterns. If you always ask why he's ignoring you, you will always be searching for ways to fix his behavior. But if you start asking why you're tolerating it, you see the bigger picture. Maybe you've been settling for half-hearted attention because you're afraid of being alone. Maybe you've been ignoring your own needs just to keep a connection alive. Maybe you've been taught to fight for love, even when it's one-sided. The moment you start questioning your own participation, you shine a light on the habits and beliefs that keep you stuck in unhealthy cycles. This perspective doesn't mean you ignore compassion. Yes, people go through things, and sometimes silence comes from stress, fear, or personal struggles, but compassion has limits. Understanding someone's silence doesn't mean you excuse it at the expense of your own peace. By flipping the question, you recognize the difference between empathy and self-sacrifice. You can acknowledge his struggles while still deciding that your need for respect and clarity comes first. Another powerful part of this shift is how it redefines love and connection for you. If you keep asking why he ignores you, you're lowering the standard to simply wanting acknowledgement. But when you ask why you're giving your best to someone who offers you so little, you raise the standard. You begin to expect consistency, communication, and presence because you realize that anything less doesn't meet the level of love you deserve. Think about it like this. Every time you give energy to someone who ignores you, you're teaching yourself that silence is acceptable. But every time you step back, every time you ask why you're investing in someone who cannot invest in you, you're teaching yourself that you are worth more. That's the power of flipping the question. It's not about changing him. It's about changing the way you see yourself in the situation. So the next time silence enters the room and leaves you with doubts, pause before you spiral into self-blame. Don't sit there asking what you did wrong. Instead, ask yourself why you're holding space for someone who cannot show up for you. That one question will change how you move, how you love, and how you protect your peace. Because the truth is, his silence doesn't define you. Your response does. And when you choose to flip the question, you choose yourself every single time. When you care about someone, it's easy to convince yourself that a little attention is better than none at all. You wait for that one text after days of silence, and when it finally arrives, you feel a rush of relief as though you've been handed something precious. But here's the reality. That isn't love, that isn't effort, and that certainly isn't enough. That is crumbs. And when you accept crumbs, you're teaching someone that they don't have to give you the whole meal because you'll settle for scraps. Crumbs can look like many things. A good morning text after 3 days of ignoring your calls. A half-hearted compliment to keep you hanging on. An invitation only when it's convenient for him. Promises that sound sweet but never turn into actions. Crumbs keep you on a leash, giving you just enough to stop you from walking away, but never enough to truly feel secure or cherished. It's a cycle of almost enough attention, almost enough love, almost enough commitment. But almost isn't the same as all. The danger of accepting crumbs is that it slowly lowers your standards without you even realizing it. At first, you might feel frustrated by the silence, but then the tiniest gesture makes you feel valued again. Over time, you adjust to less and less until the bare minimum feels like a gift. That's not because you don't deserve more. It's because you've started to measure love based on what little he gives instead of what you truly need. When you accept crumbs, you teach yourself to survive on less than you deserve. Here's the truth. Real love doesn't make you beg. Real effort doesn't make you question where you stand. A person who is serious about you won't risk losing you by giving you just enough to keep you quiet. They will give you consistency, clarity, and care because they know you're worth it. If you have to chase for attention, fight for communication, or constantly wait for him to decide when you matter, then you're not in a relationship. You're in a situation where your heart is starving while he feeds you crumbs. Accepting crumbs also affects the way you see yourself. Every time you tell yourself, at least he texted, or at least he came around eventually, you reinforce the idea that your worth is tied to his inconsistent actions. That mindset erodes your confidence because deep down you know you deserve more, but you keep settling for less. And over time, you stop demanding what you need because you've convinced yourself that you're lucky to even get the crumbs. But think about it like this. Would you go to a restaurant, pay full price, and accept a few crumbs of bread instead of the meal you ordered? Absolutely not. So why do it with your heart? Why give someone your full love, your full effort, your full energy, and accept only pieces of theirs in return? You are not a side dish. You are not an afterthought. You are the main course, and anyone who cannot recognize that does not deserve a seat at your table. The shift happens when you decide that crumbs are no longer enough. That decision doesn't come from anger or bitterness. It comes from self-respect. It's the moment you realize that you don't have to chase, beg, or wait to be treated right. You can choose to walk away from half love and open yourself up to real love. And yes, it might be hard because walking away from crumbs often means facing loneliness in the short term, but it also creates space for someone who will show up fully, not halfway. At the end of the day, you have to remember this. Love is not proven in empty words or occasional gestures. It is proven in consistency, in effort, in showing up day after day. Don't let anyone convince you that crumbs are a feast. Don't let temporary attention trick you into accepting permanent neglect. You are worthy of the whole meal, and the moment you stop settling for scraps is the moment you create room for someone who is ready to serve you love in full. Knowing your worth is one of the most powerful things you can ever embrace because it changes the way you see yourself, the way you allow others to treat you, and the kind of love you are willing to accept. Too often, people stay stuck in situations where they are undervalued because they have forgotten who they are. They confuse attention with affection, or they hold on to someone's potential instead of paying attention to their actions. But the moment you truly know your worth, everything shifts. You stop chasing, you stop begging, and you stop settling for less than what you deserve. When you know your worth, you understand that someone ignoring you is not a reflection of your value. Their silence, their inconsistency, or their lack of effort says more about them than it does about you. It speaks about their priorities, their maturity, and their ability or inability to love fully. You cannot take that personally because your worth doesn't decrease just because someone else fails to see it. A diamond remains a diamond, whether it's admired or overlooked. Its value doesn't change based on who recognizes it, and neither does yours. One of the biggest challenges in relationships is remembering that love should feel like partnership, not pursuit. If you are always the one reaching out, always the one holding things together, always the one compromising while the other person gives you the bare minimum, then it is time to step back and remember your worth. Real love doesn't require you to shrink yourself or silence your needs just to keep someone else comfortable. When you know your worth, you stop apologizing for wanting consistency, respect, and honesty because those aren't luxuries, they are the basics. Another part of knowing your worth is learning to set boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are lines that protect your heart and your peace. They say, this is what I will accept, and this is what I will not. A man who truly values you will respect those boundaries. But if someone pushes past them, ignores them, or punishes you for having them, then that is not love. It's control. And when you know your worth, you don't negotiate with someone who tries to diminish you. You walk away because you understand that peace is better than chaos, and self-respect is better than temporary attention. Knowing your worth also requires patience. Sometimes you'll be tempted to settle because loneliness whispers in your ear. You'll think maybe a little attention is better than none, but that is a dangerous lie. Settling for less only delays the love you truly deserve. When you know your worth, you learn to wait. You trust that the right person will come along. Someone who won't make you beg, question, or doubt. Someone who won't see your standards as too high, but will rise to meet them. That patience is not easy, but it is powerful. Most importantly, when you know your worth, you begin to see yourself differently. You carry yourself with confidence. You speak with authority. You move in a way that says, I don't need to be chosen because I already chose myself. That kind of energy attracts respect, not just in relationships, but in every area of life. People treat you the way you believe you deserve to be treated. And when you know your worth, you stop tolerating disrespect in any form. At the end of the day, knowing your worth is about never forgetting that you are enough. Enough without constant validation, enough without someone else's approval, enough without settling for crumbs. Your worth is not up for debate, and it is not defined by anyone else's ability to see it. Once you know that, once you believe it deep in your soul, you stop being afraid of losing people and start being afraid of losing yourself. And that's when everything changes. Because a woman who knows her worth cannot be ignored.